Starting January 23rd, we're beginning a new series in Thursday Bible Study. For a 10-week series we're inviting you to be a part of called When God Breaks the Rules. At first, you might do a double take and ask yourself, what do you mean God breaking the rules? That doesn't sound right. We tend to assume breaking rules is something bad or wicked or sinful, and God doesn't do that, right? God is good and holy and righteous. Fair points. We also often tend to think of God as the giver of rules, not the breaker of rules, right? God famously gives some rules, commandments, and famously writes them in stone, right? There's the 10 Commandments. There's the whole covenant. Isn't God a rule giver, not a rule breaker? Well, again, it's a little more complicated. It's true that, God does give commandments throughout the Bible. It's true, Jesus does give commandments and instructions to his followers. But a more honest reading of the Bible also discovers that God reserves the right to break rules, whether they are human rules that we've foisted upon each other or imagined that came from God, or that sometimes God is even willing to bend the rules that God seems to have set in place in the first place, all for the sake of loving, saving, and redeeming the world. We're going to be taking a look at that in this new series, When God Breaks the Rules, and looking at a variety of different ways that God's action sometimes breaks either human expectations and rules and guidelines, and sometimes even things that were part of the religious rules and traditions of the history that had come before. And maybe we'll discover what some part of us already knows, that what's legal and what's right are not always the same thing. What the rules say and what is good and true aren't always the same thing. As it's been observed before, slavery was legal and freeing slaves was illegal. That the segregation rules of Jim Crow were all legal. There were laws enshrining them, and the sit-ins and marches of the civil rights movements were technically, in many cases, breaking the law, and yet we're convinced what was right there was ending segregation, was ending slavery. Even America's own history starts with revolution, breaking of rules, and breaking of relationship with a former colonizing empire. So in an important way, some part of us already knows that what the rules say and what's right isn't always the same. We're going to discover the Bible actually has a lot more to say about that. Sometimes it's where God says, I know that the culture of the day said this is the expectation or this is a rule about who's most important, say firstborns, and God goes, yeah, but I'm going to keep choosing and lifting up the secondborn or the thirdborn or the eighthborn. Sometimes it's about what people can belong in the assembly of God's people, because there were times when the assumption was if you came from a different culture or nationality or background, you didn't belong. And then God would do things to bring in outsiders and foreigners and strangers in unexpected ways. Sometimes people were really clear. The rules say you must do X on the Sabbath or not do X on the Sabbath. And Jesus comes along healing people and teaching people on the Sabbath. We might even discover that at the heart of the gospel itself, in the death and resurrection of Jesus, is a breaking open of the power of rules, or what Paul the Apostle will call the power of the law, and that the resurrection is in some sense about breaking that old power in a way that brings all of us in and sets us free from sin. We're going to discover, in other words, over the course of the next 10 weeks, that God breaks the rules pretty frequently, and that maybe our whole hope hangs on the notion that God is willing and capable of breaking the rules sometimes for the sake of people like you and me. If this is intriguing and you want to find out more, join us around the table on Thursdays at 1 o'clock here at Community of Christ. Or if you can't catch us in person, we'll have video summaries that we'll be sharing as well to help at least get people caught up if you can't be with us. But we hope that you'll join us on this journey through the story of the whole Bible, discovering how often it's good news that God breaks the rules. See you then.